They said humans strap explosives to their own backs, launch themselves into open air, and throw their bare bodies between starship guns and vacuum. That was the first rumor Zib had ever heard about Terran infantry, and it still sounded too deranged to be real. His pale, scaled tail swayed in a slow arc as he spoke, white plates catching the cool light of the exhibition hall. "Tell me," he murmured, crimson eyes bright against his snow-colored reptilian features, "what kind of allegedly sapient species thinks that's a good idea?" Vzik lost control first. The blue-feathered avian threw his head back in a wildly unrestrained way only his kind managed, beak gaping wide as sharp. Chittering cackles exploded out of him. The sound knifed through the hall, high, shrill, and utterly oblivious to social volume limits. Zib felt his scales darken in mortified heat. Nearby species turned to stare. A tight knot of Morvians angled their sensor stalks toward the trio in clear disapproval. A pair of Kelrans dimmed slightly, their bioluminescent skin pulsing in offended gray. Even a dignified Archon halted mid-conversation to glance over a long, irritated look. "Vzik, please," Pollier said, though his own amusement shimmered openly in the warm amber and orange tones rippling across the ridges crowning his otherwise ordinary green face. For a member of a species most called unremarkable, Pollier's emotions were comically easy to read across species lines. His people's biology shifted the ridges on their skulls through the spectrum, reds, oranges, yellows for comfort and joy, cold blues, and purple for fear or anger. Right now, his ridges blazed a bright, molten orange. "You're drawing half the hall," he added. "This is the first Galactic Military Exposition humans have ever attended. It's supposed to be dignified, remember?" Vzik tried. He truly did. His uproarious peals collapsed into snorting little chirps, his bright eyes still wide and wet with mirth. Zib exhaled in shaky relief as the barrage of glare slowly faded, and the surrounding delegations drifted back into their own conversations. The exhibition hall sprawled out ahead of them, towering ceilings, layered walkways, and a glowing maze of booths, weapon platforms, and hovering displays from across known space. The Morvian Confederation showed off graviton disruptors in a polished dark steel pen. The Kelran Imperium had a whole ring dedicated to their new phase shield lattice. Rows of armored vehicles, drone clouds, stealth frames, and bioengineered shock troops filled every direction, and there the three of them stood, mocking the only species in the hall that none of them had actually seen in combat yet. "You know what else I heard?" Pollier leaned in, voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. His ridges deepened into a darker orange gossip color. "The humans still field chemical propulsion weapons," he whispered, "in their main ground forces." Zib's tail went still mid-swing. "Chemical propulsion?" he echoed. "As in combustion-based kinetics?" "Exactly." Pollier's ridges brightened. It wouldn't be odd if they kept a few legacy pieces for ceremonial units or niche situations. Lots of civilizations do that. But according to my source, these relics are still standard issue across almost every military branch. Vzik detonated again. His laughter blasted across the hall louder than before, a storm of sharp, piercing shrieks that made Zib physically wince and sent a flash of violet shame across Pollier's ridges. Heads turned a second time, but now Vzik was too far gone to notice. His wings fluttered uncontrollably as he hopped in place, to lone feet doing a ridiculous shuffle on the polished floor. "Vzik!" Zib hissed, grabbing the edge of one wing with a clawed hand. "Keep it down." Vzik wheezed, trying to talk between convulsions of hilarity. His words came out broken, shredded into pieces by laughter, but still painfully intelligible. "Chemical," he choked on a shriek. "They're using," another burst of cackling, controlled explosions in space, breathless gasps, while everyone else, he had to stop just to suck in air. Everyone else is using beams and particles. His voice carried across their entire section of the hall now. Zib could practically feel eyes burning into the back of his skull. His embarrassment climbed from uncomfortable to intolerable, his scales draining toward a sickly gray. "And the jetpacks." Vzik pressed on, tears streaming from his bright avian eyes. "Imagine some poor human," he gulped between giggles, strapping explosives to their back, flailing around like some suicidal insect trying to fight actual ships. He broke again, folding over himself with wheezing laughter. Polyer tugged at Vig's other wing, his ridges flickering orange amusement and blue alarm in frantic alternation. "Vig! Seriously, you need to—" "Soft little bodies," Vzik shouted right over him, somehow finding a louder setting. "No real armor, no real shields." And that was when Zib noticed a human. The figure stood directly behind Vig, arms folded across the chest of a sharply cut formal uniform. The human was tall, almost 2 meters by Zib's quick estimation, with dark skin, close-crop hair, and a posture that radiated quiet control. His expression was relaxed. His eyes were not. Something deep in those brown irises made Zib's instincts whisper danger. Polyer saw him a heartbeat later. His head ridges snapped to a hard cold blue. Pure alarm. His hand shot out, fingers tightening painfully around Zib's forearm. Vig, still laughing and babbling, felt none of it. And then they actually tried to fight ships with targeting. The human placed one hand on Vig's shoulder. The transformation was instant. Vig's head whipped around in that unsettling avian way, neck rotating far beyond what any reptilian or mammalian spine would tolerate. His laughter died mid-cackle as he found himself beat to nose with a human's calm, very close face. "Excuse me," the human said. His voice was smooth, polite, and edged with steel. "Don't you think you're being a bit rude?" Blocking the passage, shouting over everyone, mocking human soldiers, and on top of all that, being completely wrong. Zib watched Vig deflate. Literally. His feathers pressed tight to his body, in a classic avian display of burning shame. His beak opened and closed a few times. Nothing emerged. The shift from obnoxious hilarity to stunned silence was so absolute that, for a second, Zib almost felt bad. Almost. But Vig was still his friend. That meant something. Zib met Polyer's eyes. In that single shared look, a whole unspoken conversation passed between them. Polyer's ridges flickered blue uncertainty, then orange resolve, finally settling on a steady yellow agreement. They wouldn't let Vig stand alone. "He's right about one point," Zib said, forcing his voice to stay steady as he addressed the human directly. "Vig was too loud, and we were inconsiderate for stopping in the middle of the walkway. We should step aside." One of the humans' eyebrows rose. "But he isn't wrong about human tactics," Zib continued, tail swaying again, now with challenge instead of mirth. "Those jetpacks are dangerous and crude. Throwing individuals at ships isn't strategy. It's a suicide note." "Exactly," Polyer added. His ridges glowed a bold, unwavering orange now. "And the chemical weapons. We've heard all about them. Primitive combustion devices on a modern battlefield? There's no delicate way to say this. Your forces are outclassed before they even deploy." The human simply regarded them for a long moment. Then he sighed, uncrossed his arms, and shook his head, muttering something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like, "Of course they think that." "My name is Evan Brown," he said aloud, extending one hand in a human greeting gesture. None of them moved to take it. "And it seems you three are carrying some very persistent misconceptions about how humans fight." He gave a small, almost tired smile. "So here's my offer. I'm taking you to the live exercises. You'll watch our troops in action. After that, if you still think our tactics are suicide," he shrugged, "you'll at least be wrong with first-hand experience." Zib exchanged another glance with his friends. Vig had regained a sliver of composure. His feathers weren't quite plaster flat anymore, though they still drooped. Polyer's ridges flickered rapidly through curiosity, defiance, and something like intrigue. "We were going to watch the human demonstration anyway," Zib said, injecting more bravado into his tone than he felt. "Having one of you comment in real time will make it even better when we get a laugh in your face after." Polyer tilted his head, ridges settling into a thoughtful yellow-green. "What are you, anyway?" he asked. "Frontline soldier?" Vig gave a faint approving chirp at the question, confidence slowly creeping back. Evan's lips curved into a smile that Zib didn't like at all. "Me," he said lightly. "These days, I push more paperwork than anything else, but I had my cadet years." His smile sharpened with a hint of mischief. "How about I introduce you to a live training run with our Space Marines? I'm very interested to see your reactions." Before any of them could formulate a response, Evan turned and started walking, clearly expecting them to follow. Zib shrugged helplessly at his friends. They fell into step behind the human, weaving through the multicolored tide of uniforms, armor, and strange physiques. Everywhere Zib looked, the galaxy stared back. Thoraxian delegates moved in a cluster, natural armor plates gleaming under the hall's lights. A group of luminars glowed softly, bioluminous bodies shimmering with internal patterns. One of the rare deep-think collective entities drifted past, its surface flowing like liquid metal, countless eyes appearing and vanishing. Evan walked as if he'd memorized the floor plan. They passed under towering displays showing shield generators in cross-section, drifted by a fenced-off swarm of autonomous microdrones, and skirted a cordon zone marked for high-risk biological enhancement pods. After what felt like several minutes of purposeful walking, they stepped through an archway and emerged into a vast open chamber. Zib froze, eyes widening. The space was enormous, clearly built for live demonstrations rather than static exhibits. Reinforced transparent barriers and sandbag lines ringed a three-dimensional combat arena at least 200 meters across and 50 meters high. Floating holographic markers trace boundaries, altitude limits, and scoring sectors in shifting light. Trading armor for freedom of movement, Evan said, gesturing toward the arena. That's the foundation of our jetpack doctrine. You called it stupidity. I'd like you to watch what it actually looks like. They approached a sandbag line within skepticism. Zib's translator implant automatically dialed into the local broadcast feeds and began catching human voices from the staging area on the near side of the zone. About 20 human Marines stood there, checking gear and going through pre-combat rituals. Their armor surprised Zib. It looked far lighter than the towering powered frames many species favored, mottled gray and black plates with integrated harnesses, hardpoints, and utility pouches along chest and thighs. Between their shoulders sat compact jet units with four exhaust nozzles. Two aimed downward, two canted outward, a design built for violent, multi-vector thrust. Those ships, Pollier murmured. Zib followed his pointing hand. 3 small spacecraft hovered at the opposite end of the arena, engines on standby. The Vzik, Pollier added. I've never met them personally, but every report says they're capable fighters. Zib nodded slowly. The Vzik craft were sleek, predatory things, no wasted lines, just swept wings, a sharp nose, and weapon hardpoints studded along the hull. Even powered down, they radiated menace. Gun ports gaped along their flanks, and missile pods hung under the wings, squat and lethal. Attention! The command boomed across the arena. Zib's gaze snapped to the Marine who had stepped forward. The human was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the same armor as the others with additional insignia marking command. The name stenciled across his chest plate read, Stone. His face looked carved from something harder than bone. Square jaw, aligned skin, eyes that seemed to measure everything and miss nothing. Marine, Stone barked, his voice carrying with a raw edge that bypassed language and went straight to instinct. We're using non-lethal simulation weapons today, but don't fool yourselves. He swept his gaze across his troops. Every being in this hall is watching. They're asking whether Earth belongs in their war councils. They're wondering if our tactics are viable, or if we're just primitives playing with dangerous toys. We answer that question right now. The assembled Marines answered with a single, rolling shout that made Zib's scales tingle. Ora! So here's the plan, Stone went on, voice rising. We show them what mobility does to firepower. We show them why speed beats armor. We show them how 20 humans with jetpacks turn 3 combat spacecraft into scrap. He paused, letting the words hang. And we do it without a single simulated death. Not one. Yes, sir. The reply slammed into the barriers like a shockwave. I said not one. Stone roared. Is that understood? Yes, sir. Even louder. Stone gave a curt nod. Good. Trust your wingman. Trust the patterns we drilled until your muscles hate me. Be fast. Be precise. Be unpredictable. Dismiss the positions. Zib turned to his friends, keeping his voice low. You heard that? 0 casualties. They honestly think they can fight 3 ships without losing anyone. Vig's feathers had puffed up again, his earlier humiliation apparently overwritten by new disbelief. "Bold or stupid," he muttered. "My credits are still on stupid." Pollier's ridges rippled a cynical orange. 3 ships versus 20 soft targets carrying chemical weapons and explosive packs, he said. Probability models don't favor the humans. "Don't make the ending up before the fight starts," Evan said mildly beside them. Zib waved one claw in a dismissive arc. "We've seen enough simulations to predict the framework. The ships will obtain firing solutions. The humans will scatter. Some might dodge a few shots. In the end, they'll be plucked out of the air one by one. Mobility only matters if you can avoid hits. Those ships have tracking systems." Vig and Pollier nodded. Then all 3 leaned over the sandbags as the forces moved into position. The Vzik ships rose, anti-grav humming, sliding into a loose triangular formation that covered one another's blind angles. The human Marines triggered their jets. Zib felt his skepticism falter for just a second. Jets of blue-white exhaust flared beneath the packs, roaring through the arena. 20 humans surged into the air, climbing in a tight cluster toward their starting sector opposite the Vzik craft. "Look at them," Vig muttered. "All bunched up. First rule of any engagement: don't present your enemy with one big target." Impressive wasn't the same as effective, Zib reminded himself. A horn blared. The exercise began. The humans detonated outward. There was no other word for it. The tight knot of Marines exploded into motion, shooting in every direction at once. Some rocketed straight up, others dove, some cut sideways at impossible angles. Within 3 seconds, 20 distinct trajectories laced the entire arena. Zib blinked. He couldn't even track them all. The Vzik ships responded just as he predicted. Weapons swiveled. Tracking arrays lit up, targeting algorithms, hunting for solutions on the swarming shapes. The lead ship's main guns locked onto a Marine who had climbed high and left. But by the time the barrels finished swinging, the human wasn't there. He killed upward thrust, fired lateral jets, and shot sideways, so violently his body went into a controlled spin. The guns tried to follow. The Marine flipped again, dove, then twisted into a new vector that defied every intuitive flight model. "They're not flying," Pollier breathed, ridges flickering yellow in stunned realization. "They're something else. That isn't flight. That's pure combat maneuver." "Exactly," Evan said. "Every push of thrust, every turn, every spin is designed to break a lock before it completes." Vzik energy beams opened up. Blue lances of simulated fire stitched across the arena, lethal in any non-simulation engagement. They slashed toward Marines, only to carve through empty air as the humans yanked themselves clear at the last possible fraction. One Marine shot directly into the path of a beam. Zib braced for the first kill. At the last instant, the human cut all thrust and dropped like dead mass. The beam passed right through the space where his chest had been. His jetpack reignited as he fell, kicking him sideways and forward toward the very ship that had tried to vaporize him. Another Marine danced under the angry chatter of a point defense turret on the center Vzik ship. The gun spat in short, surgical bursts, trying to anticipate his motion. The human flew in a twitching zigzag. 3 short bursts left, 1 long drift right, a sudden snap upward, then back. There was no rhythm to solve, no pattern to feed into prediction models. Each motion was a live response to what the guns were doing. "It's about to get serious," Evan murmured. This time Zib didn't bother pretending not to hear. He simply couldn't look away. From chaos, a subtle structure emerged. 20 Marines filled the entire arena volume, but Zib's mind started picking out an invisible net connecting them. They weren't randomly scattered. They were arranged in a shifting 3-dimensional web that covered every line of approach to the 3 ships. Pattern Delta. Stone's voice cut through the roar, echoing from his armor speakers. Execute. The chaos sharpened. Movements adjusted. Spacing changed. Lines converged and diverged. Zib could now see 3 distinct swarms forming. 7 Marines shading toward the lead ship, 7 toward the left, 6 toward the right. They never formed classic formations. Each individual kept that frantic, evasive unpredictability, yet somehow they held a coordinated shape around their targets. The first group dove on the lead Vzik craft. 7 humans closed in from multiple angles. The ship's weapons whirled, trying to prioritize limited firing lanes. It fired at the closest Marine, a human coming in from below. The Marine twisted midair, his pack firing asymmetrically to throw him into a spin that carried him outside the beam's line. The simulated blast grazed his shoulder instead of his chest. His armor flashed yellow, damaged, still in play. First blood to the Vzik, Vzik said, a touch of satisfaction creeping back into his voice. But the ship had focused entirely on that one threat. The other 6 closed the gap. Zib realized the wounded Marine had offered himself as bait, sacrificing a clean record to draw the ship's anger and give his teammates an opening. 2 Marines attacked from the port side. Weaving so close together, they almost looked like a single target. Too close, by every standard doctrine Zib knew. The ship's tracking had trouble separating them. When it finally locked on and fired, both humans broke in opposite directions. The beam split the difference, hitting nothing at all. On the starboard side, 3 Marines came in a loose arrowhead. The lead soldier took a hit. His leg armor flashed yellow, registering simulated damage. He did not break off. He pushed harder, jetpack screaming, charging directly at the hull. "He's going to crash," Pollier blurted, ridges flaring blue. The Marine pulled up at the last possible second, skimming so close to the ship's plating that Zib's scales prickled in sympathy. As he surged past, his hand snapped out. Something metallic clanged against the hull and stuck, a small device with a blinking red light, a magnetic charge. The Marine's momentum carried him over the spine of the craft. His pack flared again, redirecting him into a spiraling climb that dragged him out of the ship's firing arc. The last 2 Marines in that attack vector slipped beneath the ship, ducking under its main gun's optimal traverse. Their so-called primitive weapons came up, chemical propulsion handguns. Even over the roar of jets, Zib heard the difference. Not the humming whine of energy discharge, but hard, percussive barks as physical rounds spat from barrels propelled by contained explosions. It sounded archaic. The results did not look archaic. Simulated impacts lit along the underside of the ship, focused on what the overlays labeled as engine cells and vulnerable structural joints. Yellow warning indicators flared along the Vzik hull. "Hit and run," Evans said quietly, an unmistakable note of professional pride in his voice. "We don't let the ships own the sky. We move too fast to be good targets, hit weak points, then vanish. Chemical guns might look crude, but they're simple, robust, and accurate enough to hit subsystems from 100 meters out while the shooter is spinning." Zib wanted protest, but he was watching it happen. The 7th Marine in the first group had been circling at medium distance, waiting. When the ship's targeting arrays locked downward, focused on threats below, he dove from above. His attack vector would have been suicide against full, optimized air defenses. But the ship's point defense net was already choke chasing the lower Marines. By the time it noticed the plunge from above, he was too close and too fast. He raked a burst of fire across the upper hull. More yellow lights flared, simulated damage to comms, sensors, secondary systems. Then he was past, pulling out with a brutal high G curve, his pack snarling as it redirected thrust to yank his body out of the ship's desperate return fire. The 2nd Marine group engaged the center of Zik's ship with variations on the same philosophy. One soldier streaked straight at the bridge, rounds hammering the reinforced viewport. They didn't penetrate, but the ship jerked violently. The pilot, apparently, did not appreciate projectiles slamming directly into their field of view. That moment of disorientation was all another Marine needed to slip in from the blind side and slap 2 more blinking charges onto the hull. This, Vzik started weakly. His feathers had lost all their earlier swagger. This isn't how it's supposed to go. Ships should be able to track individuals? Evan finished mildly. They're trying. Every system has limits. On the right flank, the 3rd group split the final ship's attention perfectly. 3 Marines conducted aggressive attack runs from different approach angles, while 3 others held mid-range positions, laying down suppressive fire and forcing the ship to keep turning. One of the close assault Marines took a direct hit. His armor flashed red. A horn sounded over the arena. First casualty. Polyer said softly, ridges swirling with conflicted color. But look, they're already closing the gap he left. It was true. Even as the dead Marine peeled away and drifted toward the outskirts of the zone, the remaining soldiers shifted positions. No panic, no confusion, just instant adjustment. The ship had tunneled on the Marine it killed, following him with its main guns to confirm the simulated destruction. In that heartbeat of focus, another human darted in from the opposite side and planted a charge against the ship's primary thruster cluster. The lead Vzik ship shuddered. The 7 Marines surrounding it had concentrated their efforts on a wing fuselage junction. Multiple simulated hits stacked across the same stress plating and internal structures. Status lights flared from yellow to angry red across wide sections of its hull. Concentrate on primary joints. Stone's voice snapped. First ship goes down now. Group 1. Omega assault pattern execute. The rhythm changed. Hit and run turned into a coordinated hammer strike. 2 more Marines zeroed in on maneuvering thrusters, their jets arcing them into lethal angles. Under combined assault, the simulation system finally conceded. Every indicator on the lead ship flashed red. It began to descend in a controlled, powerless glide toward the ground, the arena systems treating it as a destroyed hulk that, in real combat, would be venting atmosphere and corpses. The crowd erupted. Zib hardly heard them. He stared at the falling ship, brain stuttering. 1 combat craft, down by 20 primitive infantry. Their relic guns actually work. Polyer said faintly, ridges shifting toward a humbled yellow-green. They're ripping ships apart with charges and projectiles. Blow the charges. Stone's command hit like a blade. For a half-second, Zib didn't understand. Then he remembered the blinking devices he'd seen slapped onto hulls during the chaos. He scanned the remaining ships again. The center craft bristled with at least 6 attached charges. The rightmost ship had 4. They detonated together. The explosions were all simulation, holograms layered with sound and vibration. But the effect was spectacular. Orange-red blooms rippled across both hulls in perfectly timed sequences. The damage overlays told the real story. Both ships went instantly, completely red. The arena systems flagged them as destroyed. The center vessel's entire port side showed as gutted. The rightmost ship's tail section registered as severed. In a live engagement, neither crew would have survived. From the first horn to the last blossoming detonation, less than 6 minutes had passed. The hull exploded into noise. Cheers, whistles, trills, roars, clicks, the whole chaotic orchestra of cross-species approval. Zib, Vig, and Polyer just stared. 3 downed ships. 19 living Marines. 1 simulated dead. Hey, quick pause. A commentator's voice floated over the arena feed. If you're enjoying what you're seeing, hit that like button while the Marines show off. The surviving humans transitioned from combat motion to crisp formation flight. They pulled into neat rows, jetpacks now burning in smooth, steady lines. Freed from the need to be unpredictable, they indulged in pure showmanship. 1 Marine rolled completely, spiraling a corkscrew trail of exhaust. Another fired a celebratory burst straight up into the energy ceiling. 2 passed each other in opposing directions and slapped hands in midair. The crowd adored every second. Tentacles waved. Heads bobbed. Forelimbs of countless shapes flashed in applause. Evans stepped up beside the stunned trio, watching the Marines glide. His expression stayed neutral, but satisfaction flickered plainly in his eyes. So, he said conversationally, still feel like laughing? He turned his gaze on Vig. Especially you. Where's that legendary noise? Zib's tail went completely still. He looked at Vig. The avian's feathers were plastered flat again, but this time the posture wasn't just shame. There was something heavier there now. Recognition. Understanding. Maybe even respect. Polyer's ridges shifted through a complicated pattern Zib rarely saw. Blue uncertainty, purple embarrassment, orange respect, yellow comprehension braided together. Zib's gaze drifted back to the arena. The grounded ships, the celebrating Marines, the roaring crowd. He replayed the entire engagement in his mind. The jetpack insanity that turned out to be meticulously tuned three-dimensional evasion and encirclement. The primitive chemical weapons used with surgical precision against engines, joints, and power nodes. The explosive packs that were not self-destructive lunacy, but the exact maneuverability tool needed to turn individual soldiers into target ships could not reliably lock onto. Most of all, he thought about Stone's promise. No casualties. One simulated dead in an exercise against 3 armed ships. Not a miracle. Not luck. Training. Doctrine. Discipline. He swallowed. Pride went down like swallowing glass, but he forced it anyway. He turned fully to Evan. "We were wrong," Zib said. His voice came out steady. "I was wrong." Vzik stepped forward, head lowered. "I mocked what I didn't understand," he said quietly. "I'm sorry." Polyur's ridges settled into a sober, honest purple. "I believed rumors instead of evidence," he admitted. "I judged before I ever saw the truth." Evan blinked, genuinely surprised. His brows rose. "Huh," he said. "I honestly expected you to double down. Maybe claim the Vzik flew poorly, or insist you needed more data points." "No," Zib said firmly. "What we dislike more than anything is those who refuse reality. We may be idiots sometimes. We are not liars to ourselves." Evan extended his hand again. "How about we reset?" he asked. "There's a decent bar in the delegation section. Want to grab a drink later and ask all the questions you clearly have now." Zib clasped the human's hand, feeling the solid grip close around his own. "We like that," he said, as they walked away from the arena, leaving the echo of cheering and roaring jets behind. Zib realized his entire view of humanity had shifted in less than an hour. He had watched a backward species tear down 3 ships with bodies, explosives, and sheer audacity, then turn the sky into a celebration. What he hadn't seen yet, what no simulation could fully show, was how those same Marines would fight when the targets weren't holograms, the ships weren't friendly, and the galaxy wasn't merely watching, but burning. If you liked our video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it, because we bring such good stories.